Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a couple of things to get into, but before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcast here on the YouTube platform. So again, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. With that being said, let's go ahead and get right into today's episode, starting off with Franz Wagner, who just seems to not be able to miss when it comes to him and Team Germany's success in EuroBasket so far. They are 5-0 so far in EuroBasket, going to the next round of the selection stages, and are coming off of a big-time victory over Team Finland. For those who are not familiar, Team Finland is led by Lauri Markkanen, who Germany was able to hold to 11 points in this matchup. Wagner, on the other hand, finished with 23 points. Really solid game for him across the board, given the fact that he also was able to collect 7 rebounds as they won 91-61. Now Team Germany, pretty much as the Group B winner for this section, waits to play the 4th place finisher of Group A, which is going to be Portugal. This is set up for the Germany team to make a pretty decent run through EuroBasket and probably are the favorites to come out as the champions as of right now with what they've been able to do successfully on both ends of the floor. Franz Wagner and these guys have been absolutely lights out from start to finish of EuroBasket so far. Franz Wagner again continues to develop as a point forward in this run that they've had, and what they were able to do defensively against Lauri Markkanen was very special. Like I mentioned beforehand, held him to 11 points. There was a point in this game where the score was 21-19, and from that point on, Germany went to outscore Finland 70-42. Lauri Markkanen, on the other hand, not only was he held to 11 points, it was done on him only shooting 4 of 15 from the floor. Tristan da Silva also had a pretty solid game with 11 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 blocks. So shout out to him as well, who did most of his dirty work on the defensive end with a lot of interesting assignments, some of them even coming against Lauri Markkanen. He also had a big-time block in the 4th quarter on Lauri Markkanen. That was just, a highlight play that helped with sealing the deal in what ended up being a blowout win in the end. But shout out to Franz Wagner, shout out to Tristan da Silva, shout out to Team Germany. Again, just obviously undefeated and playing really well in EuroBasket right now. We're seeing our guys develop before our very eyes once again on both sides of the floor. Next up, interestingly enough, we've done this topic before on the podcast. I actually dedicated an entire episode to it of who would be protected in a expansion draft. And the Orlando Magic Daily, shout out to them because we referenced them so much on this podcast. They actually went out and did their own, similarly to how the Locked On podcast, I mentioned they did the experiment on the Locked On Charlotte Hornets podcast. So here are the players that they say they believe would be protected in an expansion draft. And for those who do not know, usually in an expansion draft, there's an 8 or 9 player expansion. Everybody else will be free game for the expansion team or teams to be able to pluck from the roster and their contract value. So the protected would be Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Desmond Bane, Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, Goga Batazde, Jace Richardson, Noah Pinda, Wendell Carter, Jonathan Isaac. And the guys who would get dropped, Tristan da Silva, Mo Wagner, and Tyus Jones, along with Jet Howard. Not going to lie to you guys, this is very similar to my list. I believe the one player that stood out to me that I would really consider keeping of the group that they dropped was Tristan da Silva, just for wing depth purposes and what I think he has as a high upside guy on the as a 3-and-D guy. But it's very, very similar to my list. I think the only difference between my list and this one at the time, and I've kind of changed tunes on this a bit, was I think our biggest difference was that I had Tristan da Silva, and in this list they have Anthony Black. They say particularly Black is in the crosshairs this season with his extension due up next summer. It's hard to imagine the Magic are already Magic are ready to commit to a contract with him right now. The season is big in determining his ultimate financial value, let alone what he's worth to the team. For now, it appears one of the reasons the Magic have held out of the trade deadline and paid such a big price for Desmond Bane was because they were unwilling to part with Anthony Black quite yet. There is no reason to think they'd move off of him in the position entering the season. Fair points. I also think that when you think about what Anthony Black can do defensively, what he brings to the table positional versatility wise could prove to fare more impactful than maybe what Tristan da Silva can do. Maybe because of the fact that Anthony Black is a good decision maker on ball. He's a guy who is a high level slasher. He can be a above average decision maker in terms of passing the basketball from playing the quote unquote true point guard role. Tyus Jones obviously is an easy clip. He's only signed to a 1-year deal. Same thing could be said for Mo Wagner. Those were easy. Jet Howard felt like an easy cut to me as well. I completely agree with them on that one. Across the board, I pretty much agree with their mock expansion. Like I said, the biggest question mark would be whether or not you keep Anthony Black or you keep Tristan da Silva. I'm leaning more towards Anthony Black now that we've gotten deeper into the offseason and I've discussed his value to this team so much. I would also say that if you don't take Tristan, you don't have a backup small forward. But you kept Jalen Suggs, Jace Richardson, and you kept Desmond Bane. Unless your backup small forward by proxy is Noah Penda, who can play the 3 and the 4, which I mentioned beforehand. I took Noah Penda in my expansion draft as well for what it's worth because I think he could be a point forward. So unless you're definitively putting all your trust in Noah Penda to be your backup small forward, something we don't even know if the Orlando Magic are planning on doing going into this season, the value of Tristan da Silva expands that much more. If you definitively feel comfortable in Noah Penda being your backup small forward behind Franz Wagner, your backup power forward behind Paolo Banchero, I think the positional value of what Anthony Black brings as a high-level defender and an on-ball decision maker makes it where you take him. I'm leaning slowly but surely closer to Anthony Black, but I also still believe in a lot of my initial takes when it came to me saying that I would probably keep Tristan da Silva in the expansion draft when I initially did this exercise like a month ago on my own. You guys let me know who you guys would keep in an expansion draft. You have 8 to 9 names to keep. You let me know what your list would look like in the comment section down below. Next up, CBS Sports did this thing where they chose the best draft pick of every year of this decade. And particularly the news came that, Jared McCain was picked for the 2024 NBA draft in that list. But there was 2 in particular portions that were the most head-scratching to me. In 2004, the year that Dwight Howard was drafted, they chose Andre Iguodala, who granted, yes, is a finals MVP and a guy who was a high-level contributor to a Warriors team that became a dynasty, or at least a short-lived dynasty. But Dwight Howard did still end up winning a championship, granted, in his latter years. Was a multi-time DPOY finisher. A guy who took the Orlando Magic to the finals as the de facto best player on the team and a de facto top 5 player in the league at the time. A guy who was discussed as the best player or a top 3 player at his position practically the entire time he was with the Orlando Magic, and was still in discussions as a top 10 center, even in stints like with the Houston Rockets or with the Los Angeles Lakers, the initial run with Kobe Bryant, Steve, we don't talk about that team very much because let's be honest, yikes, but still, right? That would be the first one. Andre Iguodala over Dwight Howard as the best draft pick from 2004. Feels like a reach. But what felt like even more of a reach was their choice in a more recent draft class, and one that felt at least a little bit more obvious to me, which is in 2022, they went with Jalen Williams. And don't get me wrong, coming off of a championship, second best player, all NBA caliber player in your third season, you're a guy that you have to think about, given the fact that he was drafted outside the top 10 and he's been so productive right now. Could you really slight him too much in comparison to a guy like Paulo Banchero, who has not seen nearly as much postseason success? I think there's some fairness there. The year before, in 2021, they put Alperen Sengun over guys like Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, Alperen Sengun because he made an all-star team. The actual readout says you'd be happy with Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley from the top three. If Herb Jones ever figures out the three-point shot consistently, he'll have a quiet case. He's an underrated defender in the NBA who could genuinely be a DPOY candidate on the right roster. He's not as good as Cunningham or Mobley, but he became an all-star this season, talking about Alperen Sengun. So the gap is minimal. For a number 16 pick, that's an incredible outcome. If he pairs the defensive improvement he made last season with his shooting, he has a chance at an All-NBA shot in the near future. It seems like the way they put this list together wasn't necessarily the actual best pick, and it was more of who produced the best in comparison to where they were drafted. That feels very blatant to me because for the best draft pick of 2021, you do not bring up Herb Jones before you bring up Franz Wagner. And when it came to Jalen Williams, he was drafted 12 and ended up becoming the second best option on a championship winning team within his first 3 seasons of being in the league. But I also think that Paulo Banchero has a very strong conversation for being the best draft pick of 2022. Interestingly enough, Jared McCain was chosen as the player from 2024, and they mentioned names like Jalen Wells, who was drafted at 39. So, again, I think the criteria tends to lean more towards the success rate in conjunction to where they were drafted as opposed to who is the actual best player. In 2004, from that draft class, the de facto best player from that draft class was Dwight Howard. I went back and double-checked. It was Dwight Howard. A lot of people forget Dwight Howard's resume. There's a reason why he's going into the Hall of Fame. In 2022, I think there's a stronger argument for Paulo Banchero than given. And I think the gap between Jalen Williams and Paulo Banchero is either non-existent or should favor a guy like Paulo Banchero, who is the lead player on the Orlando Magic. And the Orlando Magic are going to have to back that up by having a very strong season. Alperen Sengun over players like, don't get me wrong, maybe you can give him over Franz Wagner a little bit because Franz has not made it an all-star team just yet. But Alperen Sengun over Evan Mobley and Cade Cunningham, I think that goes to show you that the criteria is a little interesting. You guys let me know. Am I crazy? Dwight Howard, definitely the best player from 2004. And we've had the conversation in the comment section before about Jalen Williams versus Paulo Banchero. That conversation feels like it still stands. It's still going to have to kind of stand the test of time. And it's going to start with the Orlando Magic having to have a much more successful season this year because he's already shown up as a postseason performer in the past. But now it's about making a deep enough playoff run to solidify that he is like a real dangerous number one option on a championship caliber team. But this exercise actually helped facilitate what is going to be our question of the day today, which I'm bringing that back today to ask you guys essentially, if you could draft a starting 5 of Magic players drafted this century, since 2000, what would it be? Now, don't get me wrong. The list of elite level players the Orlando Magic have drafted over the last 20 years, it's not as insane as you would like. And Domantas Sabonis technically was drafted by the Orlando Magic, but ended up with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Duh. But realistically speaking, there are a pretty good, interesting amount of names. Some of the names on that list: Paulo Beccaro, Franz, Wagner, Jalen Suggs, Jonathan Isaac, DeMontis Sabonis, Aaron Gordon, Victor Oladipo, J.J. Redick, Dwight Howard. Some other ones I didn't throw on there: Cole Anthony, Chuma Okeke, Mo Bamba, um, Mario Hazonia, Dario Saric. Those are a handful of the other names that I think would at least stand out since 2000. Technically, you can also say, since it was the year itself of 2000, Mike Miller as well out of Florida. That's not, you know, that's another interesting one. That's nothing to sleep on, given the fact that that's a guy who, built out a long-term career for himself and became one of the best knockdown shooters in NBA history, right? So Mike Miller's also another interesting one. For me, my starting five, I'm going with most of the guys that we already have on the roster. Give me Paulo. Give me Franz. And honestly, I think you round that out by give me Jalen Suggs. Give me J.J. Redick. Give me Dwight Howard. I think that's the move. Jalen Suggs at the 1. J.J. Redick at the 2. Franz Wagner at the 3. Paulo Beccaro at the 4. Dwight Howard at the 5. There's a world where I like Victor Oladipo over J.J. Redick fit-wise. I also think the floor spacing of J.J. Redick could be special. You guys let me know, because I think a lot of you guys will pick a similar roster to mine. But who would you rather have that being the starting 2 guard in that situation? Would it be Victor Oladipo or J.J. Redick? Or would you start Victor Oladipo and J.J. Redick over Jalen Suggs? I think the defensive acumen and three-point shooting of Jalen Suggs makes it where he's the most deserving to start at the point guard position. But you guys let me know in the comment section down below. Would you let Victor Oladipo start at the 1 and put J.J. Redick at the 2? Would you keep Jalen Suggs at the point guard position and start Victor Oladipo next to him? Or keep Jalen Suggs at the point guard position and put J.J. Redick next to him? What would your starting backcourt for the Orlando Magic be if you could make a starting 5 of all the players the Orlando Magic have drafted since the year 2000? And also, what would the rest of your starting 5 look like around that backcourt? I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section down below. But with that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. I will see you guys again tomorrow. Again, remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new episodes. But until then, I will see you guys later. Peace.